And I put the name of the antibiotic in ChatGPT. And so it immediately told me this antibiotic is standard, but in your case, it might reactivate a really serious infection.
Like you said, doctors try their best. The healthcare system does its best, but it's sort of stuck in this antiquated model. I really want to hear how you use AI for yourself, because you've tried to figure this out as an individual. Like, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? What are the causes? What do I do? Like, what is my doctor not telling me? How have you used it for yourself?
The main thing is exactly what you said. It's connecting all of the data about me in one place so that it can be analyzed. And like the first time it happened and I connected my health records, my Apple Health data, all of my, past labs, my medical history, all in one place in ChatGPT, and just ask ChatGPT like, hey, are there patterns that you're detecting that would be interesting? I also uploaded my whole genome in there. I was blown away because there had been, again, I had seen 20 doctors, but not a single one of them had looked at the whole picture and was able to analyze all of this data and give me patterns that you can only detect when you see that full picture. So that has been really helpful in like finding new avenues to explore, getting new ideas, not having to read all of the, studies coming out because like who has the time? Like I get a summary every morning on like new studies on my condition. I get a summary from like new treatments that people on Reddit are trying out because we spend so much time when we're sick on forums trying to figure it out. Now ChatGPT does that for me. So that has simplified my life in a very big way. And in an even more concrete way, to give you a real story, last year I was having a kidney stone. I was having surgery and I was hospitalized. I developed an infection and the nurse arrives and she's like, hey, I need to administer an antibiotic for your urine test came back, with an infection. And I was like, hey, like, I'm totally fine with that, but can you wait a minute? I just want to check something. And I put the name of the antibiotic in ChatGPT and
Yeah.
already had all of my health records, right? And so it immediately told me, hey, this antibiotic is standard for a UTI, but in your case, it might reactivate a really serious infection that I had a couple years prior, C. diff. And it's like said, like, you really shouldn't use that one. There's a better one to use that will do the job, but without risking, messing up with your microbiome. And so I said that to the resident and I was expecting pushback. And in fact, the resident was actually totally relieved because she told me, she's like, I have 5 minutes to make the rounds. I cannot look at like someone else's records 5 years ago. And I'm really glad that you picked that up because that could have been really bad. So I'm glad that I can now give you the right antibiotic. And that made me realize, wow, like again, one of the most important decisions of my life would have been kind of messed up if it wasn't for AI helping connect the dots fundamentally.
It's such an important story. And you're right. Doctors are relieved because like you got 5 minutes, you got 40 patients, you're running around like crazy. You don't have time to research everything. Even with AI, it's still hard. What did you learn, Fidji, about your health that was novel or new that helped you when you started to put all your records into ChatGPT?
My whole genome was really interesting because it's not that I had like genes that were like very clearly pathological, but because of certain combinations of genes, I was able to. ChatGPT started telling me some potential drugs that doctors hadn't thought about that because of my genome could be interesting, and they ended up really helping. So that was really helpful. It also detected that I needed like B vitamins that were methylated and like things that doctors hadn't dug into. And, that was really interesting because years ago, there was this promise of genetics, like changing the whole medical world. And the reality is that it doesn't happen, right? It does happen in cancer, but like for your day-to-day care for a regular chronic illness, your doctor is not analyzing your whole genome and telling you to change your nutrition based on your genome, right? But all of this data is available and actionable and could help patients really improve. And so to me, like that combination really helped. And then combining that with Apple Health and really being able to see like, oh, actually your HRV is way better when you go to bed a little bit earlier. And like you have a better symptom day after you do that. Just correlating all of these data sources was really magical. And that's what we're hoping to do with, ChatGPT Health and making sure that you can have all of the right inputs so that your personalized health agent gets to know you better than anyone else and can really do true personalized advice, which was the promise of personalized medicine. But again, we didn't get there.
I think you're right. I think a couple of important points here. One is, according to some recent data, 93% of your health outcomes and longevity are not determined by your genetics, or determined by what we call your exposome, what your genes are exposed to and how they get expressed depending on that. And you mentioned, something quickly, which involves you need a different form of B vitamins. We're not looking for mutations, particularly in your genome. We're looking for variations in your genetics that affect how your body functions. And you need a particular form of B vitamin that bypasses a step that's kind of sluggish. It's not like a pathology per se, but it's just a little bit of a quirk. And for example, 1/3 of our DNA codes for enzymes. Enzymes run all the chemical reactions in our body. Every enzyme needs a helper. Each helper is a vitamin or mineral. And so there's a huge variation in the nutrient needs in a population. Never is looked at by doctors. They don't even probably know about half of them know about this. I mean, some of them might know about this gene, MTHFR, that I think you have. But, it's not that hard. And now we went from $1 billion genome when it was first decoded to a $300 genome. So it's really accessible for almost everybody. And only have to do it once in your life. And so now you're right. You can say, hey, what should I be thinking about that I didn't know? And how could I be helped? And I wonder if there were any other things that it suggested to you from a causal perspective, or any kind of things that your doctors hadn't suggested besides like what vitamins to take or what drugs to take.
Yeah, I think it was mostly like the challenge with chronic illness, as you know, is that you rarely collect one diagnosis. When you have one, you start collecting a lot of problems, which also points to the fact that traditional medicines put labels on conditions but doesn't understand biology. And so what was helpful was actually have ChatGPT tell me like, hey, yes, you have like, 5 different diagnoses, but fundamentally it's only one thing. You have like this dysregulation of the nervous system, and these are even some lifestyle, changes you can make, activating the vagus nerve and like things like that could potentially calm your system down. And so again, it's like finding pattern across like a variety, a constellation of symptoms and diagnostic, etc., trying to solve them one by one and trying to solve the underlying problem, which has been just really helpful.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, without being a doctor or a healthcare person or a tech person or a business person, you sort of stumbled upon what is the future of medicine, which is understanding the body as an entire ecosystem that's networked, that has root causes, that there's fundamental systems that affect everything. In my first book, over 20 years ago, I had a chapter that was called, "If you know the name of your disease, you don't know what's wrong with you," right? It's just the name of the disease. It doesn't tell you the why. It tells you the what. And I think, saying you have POTS is just the name of a syndrome. It's just a fancy medical word for saying when you stand up, you get dizzy and your heart rate goes up. That's what it means in English. But it's a fancy word, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, blah, blah, blah. And I think, we make all these fancy sounding things when we don't know what we're doing. And the truth is, there are root causes. There are reasons this is happening. There is a way to understand how to treat the system. And I think with the advent of AI applied to our personal health data set, which we've never really had the ability to do before, we're going to be able to really accelerate discovery in medicine, accelerate people relieving all kinds of chronic illnesses. I was able to cure my chronic fatigue syndrome, which, most people would say is incurable. Just like people say POTS is incurable, but it's not. And I'll help you if you want to figure it out. But so I'm wondering why OpenAI, and you in particular, head of apps, decided to start with health. Was it because of your health condition, or was it because of the fact that 230 million people a week ask ChatGPT about their health?
Definitely the leading cause was we saw that this behavior was already happening. Like, some of the best stories that I hear about ChatGPT are about helping people with their health. It's 230 million weekly. It's 40 million people daily. It's billions of conversations a week. It's 5% of total conversation. So that gives you a sense like of the scale that this is already operating at. So when we saw that, and we hadn't really done anything, super specific for healthcare on the product side. We had done a lot on the model side to answer a question in the right, accurate, factual way. But on the product side, we realized actually there is a lot to do to build upon this use case. And if we could get people to connect to their health records in a much easier way, which right now is very hard. If we could get them to connect to Function Health and pull in their data from there, from Apple Health, like now the models are powerful enough that they can extract insights out of this data in a way that no one else can. And so that was the impetus behind ChatGPT Health. And my own experience certainly influenced that, because I was already really primed to think about how we remove silos and how like the defragmentation of information could lead to much better insights. The other thing that was interesting in my mind is like, as you know better than anyone, healthcare is really sick care. It's like you go there when you're sick, whereas really what we need is preventative health. But preventative health, when doctors only have 15 minutes for you, is not going to happen that way. Whereas with ChatGPT, you can have literally a health coach, like in relationship with you every day, telling you like, okay, this is how you slept yesterday based on the data on your wearing. Today, you should do this kind of exercise. You should eat this kind of food. And then tomorrow we'll reassess again. And like having that kind of assistant to really help you with your health every day, not just when you're sick, not just when you're seeing the doctor. That's really what gives me hope that we could get to the root of chronic illness, because so much of it is lifestyle related.
Yeah. If you love that last video, you're going to love the next one. Check it out here.